Hello, and good afternoon, evening, and morning from wherever you are tuning in around the world to Overdose and Chill. You may hear my dog drinking water in the background, so apologies for that. He is thirsty. We are joined here today by Lindsay Moore from Marketplacer. Welcome.
Hello, great to be here. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed. It's a beautiful Friday at that up here in New York. I know when we first met, you were living up in Boston, but you have since relocated to where?
Just outside of Raleigh, in North Carolina. The winters were just a little too much, and the traffic was just a little too much. So decided to go back home, back to my roots.
Very cool. I know one of your coworkers from that area actually has moved further north, just contrary to the trend of moving to warmer areas. And Jenny Hopkins has gone up to Arlington, which is too cold for my taste. I'm sorry?
True hippie at heart. For those that know Jenny Hopkins, she's been in the space for a while. I think Vermont really fits her vibe. So
Vermont's great, just brutal winters. So I imagine you are enjoying the same gorgeous weather we're having up here today, I hope.
I would love, outside my window, it looks lovely. I haven't actually ventured out there.
It's the world we live in now. We sort of live in these little bubbles of seclusion and COVID and sometimes venture out. Certainly if we have pets, we do. So folks who are tuning in across Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, by all means, if you have any questions or comments along the way, drop them into the chat and we will address them as they come up. But first, if you would quickly introduce yourself, Jenny. Lindsay, I would appreciate it. We're talking about Jenny.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So hi, everybody. For those of you I don't know, I've spent most of my career, if not all of my professional career, in e-commerce, mostly by happenstance. As every college kid will tell you, they have some big dream, and mine was to save the world with a nonprofit, and yet here we are. So I had the absolute lucky chance to start my career at a company called CY, which had a real-time event processing engine. First went to market with shopping cart abandonment and really cut my teeth with probably one of the best leadership teams I've ever worked with, just being at that age and coaching me through it. So those of you who know Charles Nichols or Steve Brown or Scott Silk, who are all still in the e-commerce space, we sold that to SAP. So it was a great kind of, how do you take a company and understand where the market for e-commerce is headed and really try to build fit for purpose and seeing that innovation and then incorporating it into a bigger company and being able to leverage all their resources. Then went and wanted to do that again. So joined Zmags, really going from kind of back of the house of e-commerce to how do we think about experience for a customer, and create something that's engaging and entertaining, which is still highly relevant today, given where we're at with the pandemic and people are just spending more time shopping. And then now to marketplaces, where we're seeing the challenge, I'm at Marketplacer. And so with marketplaces, you're seeing the challenge where people want to be able to round out an experience. It's not just about the individual products that you have, but as a consumer, how can I have a bigger, better, broader experience tied into whatever your mantra is or whatever you're trying to provide? And it's perfect timing, right? We're seeing so many brands that are trying to branch out because they made a lot of money during COVID and now they've got huge numbers for next year, or they're having supply chain challenges. Or a lot of other business challenges that I don't think people expect with marketplaces. So it's perfect timing, and we're having an absolute blast.
It's been a wild, thanks for that. It's been a crazy 18 months at a minimum. Things are being turned on their head in many ways. We're seeing the acceleration of trends that were sort of starting to take hold back prior to COVID. I actually was chatting with one of our fraud prevention, or said they have to call themselves e-commerce protection platforms, and they were saying they've seen an increase in fraud attempts of 350+% since COVID started. So, with this massive move to digital, things alongside that are coming there that are not really wanted by merchants. But in any event, so we've seen tremendous growth across the digital space for obvious reasons, right? Folks can only shop online in many areas and have been only able to shop online in many areas for a while now. What have you seen? I know we started chatting earlier, and I was saying, historically, people hear marketplace, they think Amazon, they think eBay, they think Walmart. That's a marketplace to them. I know you can parse through that much more effectively than I can, but when we think about what a marketplace actually is digitally, how do you sort of view technically what a marketplace does?
Yeah, that's actually the very first slide on any of our slide decks. So I told you a little about my background. I guess I forgot to tell you my title. So I run customer success and partnerships. So we have a lot of these initial conversations, both with partners as well as with customers and thinking about their marketplace strategy. And when we're walking them through, it's such a kind of a new concept. We go very much through the strategy. And the first slide is, we help you sell stuff you don't own. And I think that's at the core of it. Now, it opens up the next question of how does this differ from dropship? But really at the heart of a marketplace, it's selling stuff you don't own, selling stuff you don't have to warehouse, selling stuff that you don't have to worry about. It's not your supply chain. It's not your logistics that you're having to worry about. So it's anything that you don't own, but what that looks like and how that rounds out your brand and your experience are different and unique to each individual retailer or brand or tribe.
Okay. And what are you seeing sort of, I know we chatted back at RetailX a few weeks ago, sort of globally, we see certain trends take hold, now that we're part of this large global organization, we see different things take hold in different regions, and we're seeing patterns about where they hit first. I'm curious, from where you guys sit on the marketplace front, what trends have you seen there over the past couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things. So one, I think the pandemic has forced some interesting innovations. And so one of the things that it's a little bit unique to Marketplacer is that we actually can help, we call them tribes, where it's basically someone that has some type of community can then go and launch essentially a marketplace and e-commerce from scratch. So instead of you being a retailer and then wanting to extend your range or add additional categories, actually saying like, hey, I have, if you're FishBrain, which is an app for those of you who fish, you should check it out, by the way. It's super cool. It's only available in the US. Sorry. Partially owned by
in US
Facebook.
or in APAC? Is it US or APAC?
It's US. They're interesting. The app is in the US. Most of the team is in Sweden.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. But
Okay.
really cool app where they're the largest fishing community in the world. And they're like, how do we monetize this more? Oh, hey, let's add commerce, but none of us know commerce inside and out. So I think this concept of how can a tribe really go and monetize? And so with the pandemic, we saw really interesting use cases come out of it. So in Australia, for example, Providor launched about 18 months ago, and they had zero commerce. And now they're at a very, very large run rate. I can't disclose what it is, but I mean, they're well over the $150 million run rate mark. And so you think about that as a company that started in the pandemic. So I think one of the trends you're seeing is people saying, hey, I've got a community. How do I monetize it? But I don't want to make the investment to go and have all of the tech and the people and the warehousing and the supply chain that it requires to have your traditional e-commerce site. I think that's one. I think the other one is, how do we start thinking about our traditional relationships a little bit differently? So instead of it being, hey, we're going to do everything via dropship, or hey, for us to test out a new category, we're going to either do a collab or we're going to go ahead and buy it all. You're seeing people test in ways that are essentially a marketplace. Like, let's go and test this particular category, and then we either double down from a marketplace, or maybe we'll go and do the R&D to actually produce some type of product or some type of category like that. And then the third thing I'll say is, it's not necessarily a new trend, the connectivity that's involved. You've got to have that connectivity between the sellers, between your brick and mortar stores and your digital e-commerce space. And we're just seeing that double down because marketplaces add an additional layer of complexity. So you have to have a platform that's going to make it simple to connect all the way in. Not a new trend, but I think it adds even more to it.
Yeah, I'm curious, are you seeing, are many of these marketplaces conceived of by, as you said, sort of within the tribe or the community, because there are folks who are crafting a good, let's say, but the good they don't feel is, how do they sell that direct to consumer because it's so niche, it's so unique, or is it someone who looks out across an ecosystem and goes, you know what, I want to build a marketplace, and sort of some context there. And I know we're working with you guys in APAC. With a purveyor of artisanal cheeses. And I think, was this, in the pandemic with folks really needing to connect digitally and not having the same sort of traditional conferences and get-togethers that you used to have, and just that's when you chat, you're chatting sort of all day, every day across the internet. And you're going, you know what, I had this great cheese. I have this great cheese. I don't want to build on a website because who's going to come for, a wheel of brie? But if we get together, we can build that. I don't know if it makes sense. I'm curious what you've seen out there.
It does. And I think we've actually seen that trend for a while. It's just that it's manifested itself a little bit differently now. So Facebook did a study probably 6 years ago at this point, where and I don't remember the exact number, but they surveyed a whole bunch of millennials and said, are you more or less likely to buy from an organization that has the same essentially social identity? And they didn't use the word morals, but ideation and identity
values.
You. And they were like, absolutely. And that's what we're seeing, right? Millennials really, it's an identity that you're buying into almost more than a product. And so I think this is a new manifestation that says, instead of it being a brand, which is historically, hey, I'm wearing X brand, it's around an idea or a concept. So whether it's fitness for women, or whether it's fishing, or whether it's cheese, which, by the way, I'm all about the cheese marketplace. And we internally just said, hey, if you could create your perfect marketplace, like for you, what would it look like? And I'm thinking, well, no one would create it, because for me, it's like, a bunch of pony stuff. And then let's throw some wine in there, maybe a little bit of cycling. But there is this concept that you can take that identity, and we're seeing brands wrap around it too. So you take someone like Patagonia. If you haven't checked it out, they have essentially a refurbished marketplace. And the way they position it is, we are eco-friendly. That is what Patagonia stands for. They went black during when there was a crisis around national parks, and said, we're so committed to this identity, we're going to close down our e-commerce. And so now they've launched a marketplace, which is fulfilling both of these identities. Hey, you can give back your goods. You get a credit to go and buy brand new Patagonia goods. But then we can resell them so that the life of this good continues, and we're not actually throwing things away and then creating more waste. Because as we know, in the apparel industry, there's a lot of chat around how do you reduce waste in that process. So while it is a brand, they're really doubling down on, from a marketplace perspective, how do we round out that identity and that customer experience?
Yeah, and certainly Patagonia is one of the best at this for a host of reasons. And certainly, I grew up in the 80s. I'm a kid of the 80s. There was IBM, there was AT&T. There were the folks you had to buy from. You had no choice, and you didn't know who, what, where, when, why, who they were. Now, to your point, people care about who they're doing business with. They care about this. They want to know the story behind the brand they're buying from, especially because we are in such a digital world. You don't really know who it is. So, it used to be the about us, the our story was always like a footer item on a website. And now, almost always for our merchants, we're telling them, it's a global nav item. People want to know about the brand story and the brand values. And I'm wondering if we're sort of getting to a place in the e-commerce ecosystem where, like, things that used to differentiate merchants, things like giving back, things like being philanthropic, building third world projects and giving, is table stakes. I don't know if it is yet, but I'm wondering if it is important, and I support it. And I'm wondering now if that's not something that differentiates you, but if you're not doing it, it's hurting you. But different conversation.
Again, it's a little off topic, but near and dear to my heart. The trend I'm seeing and that I would love to continue seeing is, I think there's a difference between saying we're going to go and volunteer and give back versus we're going to inherently integrate it into our business model, like this Patagonia marketplace. And I think that's where we're starting to see people say, how can we make this more just completely integrated, whether it's supply chain or whether it's fundamentally, part of our business model. It's almost a double bottom line company, which is another thing I'm a fan of. So we should collaborate on that on a future chat.
Cool. So you touched on ponies for a second there, and I'm now recalling when I asked you for a lifestyle pick to use for the creative assets for this. You were mid jump atop a gorgeous horse. So I'm assuming you are a fan. You are an equestrian.
I am a little obsessed. So I have 3 horses. I compete year round in something called show jumping. So it's fastest time over a course of jumps without knocking anything down wins. I should be a lot better considering how much time and money I spend, but I still love it. So that's okay. And I spent 6 months of COVID living, because I realized I could live anywhere, in a trailer with a feral cat and a Colombian teenager so that I could train with this awesome 80-year-old Colombian guy who lives in the middle of nowhere, Florida, and is ex-military. And so I would ride. I took a couple of months off, and I rode about 8 horses a day and got yelled at by an old Colombian guy. It was pretty magical.
Wow, very cool. I have my first cousin is, she's a vet, and she actually for many years worked up at the Saratoga Springs track and worked with the, mostly on the owner's pets, not the horses. She was not an equine vet. She was a small animal vet, but, so had lived up there for almost forever. All right. Sorry. Got sidetracked there.
No
so
worries.
Marketplaces, when you're looking to build a marketplace, what are the biggest challenges? What is the tech stack needed to do that? Outside of certain platform like Marketplacer, and then what are the barriers to entry that you're seeing merchants having to overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 things there, and I'm writing it down because it's Friday afternoon and I have no ability to remember things. So if I don't write down both of your questions, I'll only remember one.
I have a bad habit of asking multiple questions.
So I'll back up a little bit and say, again, I think marketplaces are getting such traction right now, but we always get people that are like, hey, I think I have this idea. I think it's a marketplace. I'm not really sure. And what we're finding is, and we sort of say, like, there's no stupid question. People, it's like commerce 10 years ago. No one has a fully baked strategy, and they're not entirely sure how to sort of roll that out. So we think about kind of the business problem first. So to tech stack wise, just back to selling stuff you don't own, what that looks like and what's required. So obviously you have to have an e-commerce platform, whether it's a separate e-commerce platform or the marketplace provider you're looking at has an e-commerce platform built in. So that you can actually sell stuff, but then you have to connect sellers. So you have to get some sellers and you have to then connect them into your e-commerce platform. So the traditional way that a lot of people understand that is, hey, we're going to do drop shipping, but it gets really time consuming and cumbersome, and you run into potential inventory challenges and you're managing things in spreadsheets. So the overhead of something like that from an experience perspective, but also a labor perspective, is really high. And that's where marketplaces come in because of those constraints with drop shipping. Surf Stitch is a great example. They were doing drop shipping. It was wildly successful, but they're like, we can't really get past like 40 sellers. And so they came on board with Marketplacer. It was a fairly short process, but their whole view was, we want to extend out how many sellers that we can actually work with. And so we have brands that are working with us that are, have thousands and thousands of sellers that they're managing, because a marketplace essentially makes it self-service for that seller to plug into your platform so that you have their inventory, you can manage all their commissions, all the payments, all the structure of harmonizing their product information with in the marketplace platform, in with the e-commerce platform. And obviously Marketplacer does that for our customers. Barriers to entry. Yes. It's so interesting because everybody comes to us and they're like, cool, like we've got to dig in and we've got to dig into the tech, and you absolutely do. But in general, the biggest barrier to entry we find is people don't have a strategy. They just don't know enough yet. And so part of what makes us so unique is that we actually started with our own marketplace over 10 years ago. So bikeexchange.com, it now operates in 10 countries, a publicly traded company. Our founding team and actually some of our team here in the US founded that, built it up, and understands both the positive and the negative IP of how you need to think about a marketplace strategy. And that's where we're really making sure that we're partnering with partners like Overdose, who can also bring that strategic lens to say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? How do we think about the strategy? What's your unfair advantage? How are you, where do you want to test out? What do the categories look like? How do we think about a commercial model? How do we think about some of the unsexy pieces like governance and SLAs and logistics? Because there's actually a lot more to a marketplace strategy than just a piece of tech. If you're out to just buy a piece of tech, you are going to fail. There has to be a broader package thought process and strategy around it. And so we walk customers through that, and the amount of consultative work and scoping, both from a strategy and a commercial perspective, that we do with a customer and a partner is pretty big. So I'd say find a partner whether it's tech or SI or both, that you really trust and can go through and say, how do I think about this? How do I build a business case? How do I go and think about a seller strategy? What it needs to be in a seller pitch kit? What needs to be in a seller SLA and a seller contract? And there's a lot of nitty gritty that goes into that. And what's the org that needs to staff it? Because at some point it's going to be way less overhead than drop shipping, but you still want to make sure you have the right pieces that you can assign to the right people on your team. So it was a long-winded answer.
No, it was a great answer. And I think it's helpful because we're having several conversations now with folks who are interested in going down this road. And one of the challenges that they have is, we know we have folks who want to buy products in this space. We know that's there. Now we have a bunch of vendors who we've spoken with who are interested in this initiative. But in order for them to commit to this initiative, they're like, we want to see what it would look like, right? We want to know how our products will be displayed, what kind of data we can show, how we would syndicate our data out to that platform, right? Are they leveraging a DAM, leveraging a PIM? Like what do they need to sell on it? But before that, what is this? You're building a mall, and you're asking me to put a store in it, but I want to see the mall before I put my store in it, kind of thing, right? So, what have you guys seen in terms of helping folks who have these visions, if it all work through? What are the steps? What's the order of operations for them in order to make sure they have all the pieces locked down to have an effective business strategy to actually invest in what is, a material investment to build a marketplace website?
Yeah, and we start pretty basic. So we'll go through what is the purpose of your marketplace? And typically the way that this comes out is we have a couple of conversations with them, and then we'll sort of put it into a strategy deck and a template. But I encourage people to think through in the beginning, if you want to start a marketplace, why? What's the purpose of that marketplace? What's it going to do? And then we walk customers through a series of other things, like what's your unfair advantage? And every strategy session will have, if you've ever done kind of a basic business case strategy session, it'll have something similar. This just has sort of a marketplace slant. So what's your unfair advantage in that marketplace, and how can you take advantage of that right now? So we like to think about it as a crawl, walk, run approach, kind of a now, next, later, because you're never going to launch. You shouldn't launch with kind of the big bang on day one. So what's your unfair advantage for the purpose of that marketplace? And then how do you capitalize on that advantage today? And then how do you then build and scale that out? And then the commercial model needs to reflect that as well. So it then helps give you the basis for what your seller strategy should be. Who are the sellers that you should then go and look at, and why? And we actually find that sharing a lot of that seller strategy, once we go through that whole session with prospects and with customers, they'll package it up and it'll actually be part of their seller pitch pack. So it's just like you being pitched as a retailer by a technology vendor. The same is going to be true when you're pitching a seller, right? They have to buy into the idea of what you're trying to build, and it's something that they want to be a part of. So that typically is where kind of the process of how we go and start through that and identifying where the marketplace should be focused, what it should look like, and then how you go about finding those sellers.
Cool. So that's a great answer. Thanks for that. I'm curious, are there we touched on earlier a little bit about sort of the trends of the evolution of the marketplace sort of ecosystem. Are there any areas sort of globally that are hotspots right now for where you're seeing a lot of engagement across marketplaces and new marketplaces being built?
Yeah, so we're seeing a huge pickup in the US. I think people are starting to really raise their hand. Everyone came off kind of the wild ride of the last 18 months. They're facing a pretty big number for next year, a lot of them. We saw, just around 40% growth from all marketplaces last year, or from all websites last year, but you saw 81% on average across marketplaces, right? Wow. Massive numbers. And the more this research and data is coming out, I think people are going, that's how I'm going to hit my number next year. You're also seeing a lot in Latin America, to the point where a lot of people are plugging into various versions of marketplaces. And I think the thing trend-wise to keep in mind is the more people adopt a marketplace strategy, the more you have to be really conscious, not only what is your consumer experience, because we're always looking at that, there's always a lens to that, but it's really what's your seller experience? How easy is it for them to plug in? How every time you find a new seller that's kind of that, up and coming seller and you want the exclusivity of their product, you better have a really good model, a good support system, make it easy for them to connect in, because if not, somebody else is going to say, come and sell on my marketplace and give them, a better deal. So in thinking about a marketplace provider, make sure you're making it simple on your sellers as well as is on your team and that end customer experience. How about you guys? Are you guys seeing in one region versus another more adoption, or in any particular industry?
Yeah, I think to your point, we're actually seeing growth in the US in engagement there. As you know, we're seeing a lot of growth in the APAC region. We haven't seen a ton in Europe yet, at least across our target demo and our client base. There's been a very different digital evolution and transformation in that region compared to the US and compared to APAC. So, right now we're seeing a pretty big trend of going from legacy on-prem tech to a lot more agile, nimble, a lot of headless stuff going on in Europe right now, jumping over sort of that mid tranche of technologies. In terms of areas where you're seeing marketplaces thrive, I think I have a very small view into marketplaces from where I sit. You have a much wider lens. Are you seeing any specific verticals? Any specific, what sort of marketplaces are? What areas are hot right now?
Yeah, honestly, I think as a company, that's probably our biggest challenge, because it is all over the board, Andrew. I mean, we're signing your typical mid-market apparel company. We're signing telco. We're signing airlines. We're signing grocery. We're signing FinServe. And so it's sort of this all at once. You think about, the traditional crossing the chasm curve, and we can all be a little stereotypical about kind of what parts of retail fall into or commerce fall into that bucket. I don't think we're seeing the traditional laggards for marketplace that we saw for commerce. I mean, there will definitely be some, but I'm surprised at small companies, big companies, homegrown systems versus the Shopifys of the world, verticals, B2B versus B2C. I mean, you're really seeing a smattering that I would have never guessed.
It's interesting. Some of the industries you just referenced, I wouldn't have thought. I would say industries. What is the use case? Are you seeing more marketplaces where someone comes along and goes, listen, I want to build a community of buyers and sellers to bring their products to this marketplace, and that's my business? Or are you seeing companies that have product going to market and saying, listen, I want to sell complementary products alongside my own that I don't make myself? And it's it is their business to sell, but also to sell other folks' stuff through that marketplace.
Both. And I know that's a terrible answer, but
it is. I just, the former is logical. The latter, I haven't really come across that as much.
And again, Friday afternoon, the latter was
I'm a brand and I build a marketplace so I can also sell other folks' products that are complementary to mine or otherwise.
Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean, so Surf Stitch, right? They're a coastal lifestyle brand, and they're like, hey, cool. Coastal lifestyle, but there's a lot more that goes into coastal lifestyle than this little pair of board shorts that fits in this little bag. But I don't want to have to figure out how to warehouse and ship a surfboard. And so they rounded it out with all the high-end surfboards, skateboards. So everything on their site that's a hard good is actually a marketplace good. It's not a Surf Stitch good. And then, you look at grocery, they're like, hey, we want to really branch out in particular areas on high density, super, niche ethnic foods, but we don't know if we want to bring that all into our stores. And since everyone's ordering grocery online now, why can't we do it like that? Then you've got the traditional retailers, the kind of big box guys who already were selling other people's goods. Why not just flip the script and maybe not keep them all in inventory? Why not force some people to do, because they could never do drop ship at its scale because they're so big. But now, why can't you flip to a marketplace? Then you're not taking on as much of the risk, as much of the warehousing costs, and it gives you the ability to really experiment more, especially since some of those big box guys, they've been, I won't say struggling, but innovation has not always been their strong suit.
So I'm smiling because, and this, I reference this daily, so people who know me will laugh. I was with the Home Depot for 8 years, and I'm painfully aware of the slow-moving nature of the back office systems of big box retailers, for a number of reasons. But the growth there is always. I mean, it's a market leader, right? When folks have disposable income, they look to improve their houses, and it was always interesting working there.
And also for those guys, I think it gives them more ability to pivot faster, because you look at how people back in March, April of 2020, everyone was like, okay, cool, it's a couple of weeks. Like, just a couple of weeks, guys. Why is everyone complaining? And then here we are 16 months later. So if you have that structure in place, you can then immediately, I mean, obviously Home Depot saw massive amounts of increase and demand during this time. Are there other places and supply chains that they could have plugged in, or kind of side-by-side products? You think about all the DIY. Could you have partnered with an education company to really incorporate some of those DIY projects with education now that parents are home? I mean, I think it gives them that ability to flex to even shorter trends faster. And could you even do that for almost holidays, because you're not having to go through that task of all the lead up that happens? Can you make much shorter term decisions?
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about, and I think there's maybe a correlation here with folks who are involved in some of these marketplace initiatives. Home Depot we were very early to market with what we were calling BOPIS and BORIS. So buy online, pick up in store, buy online, return in store. And that was great from a technical perspective. The website was great. The buy online, pick up in store initiative was great. It was going to change the world. But herein lies the rub. In order to effectively execute a buy online, pick up in store, you must have in-store personnel trained on the technology and the hardware that is being leveraged to do that piece of the business. And the website and the initiative was well ahead of the in-store capabilities to actually execute on it. So in a weird twist of fate, this great new initiative actually had a lot of backlash because it was not a good customer experience. You'd buy it, you get to the store, and either at times it was not in stock, or the poor associate on the front end couldn't close it out, and here your order sitting right there and you can't pick it up, and it sometimes takes 15, 20, 30 minutes. So it was and I guess the corollary there is I'm curious, when you start thinking about some of these smaller businesses that are looking to sell in a marketplace, right? You are I don't know what the word is for, you probably know, for a cheese maker. Fromagier? What is it?
I don't know, but now I feel like we have something to Google.
There you go. So, that this might be a very small local business that isn't high tech. And, is there a barrier there where they need to understand how to leverage the technology to actually sell their stuff, in the marketplace?
Such a good question.
Cottage industry, as I was thinking of, the little cottage industries of baking cheese. Wasn't saying cottage industry is a cheese grower. I was
completely appreciate the pun. Don't try to backtrack. It was intentional, and I'm here for it. I think it's a great question, and it goes back to that seller strategy session of, what is your marketplace? What's your strategy? What's your unfair advantage? What are you going to capitalize on? And then what does that mean for the sellers that you're going to target? So if this is what you're trying to target, you absolutely need to keep in mind that if you have a really and not say they're unsophisticated, but just maybe not tech first potential seller market, you've got to consider a tech stack that's going to let them either type in a product or upload a CSV. If you have a really sophisticated customer, then you better have a platform that's going to have API level integration that they can do, because they're going to want that. Or maybe you're going to have something in between, and people who are running on a Magento, a Shopify, a BigCommerce, a WooCommerce, and you need to make sure that the platform has connections there. So it's really thinking about, and that's why having this strategy is so important going into your technology evaluation, and something that we really talk to prospects about, because you need to know what that looks like, and you need to make sure that you're not going to then buy a piece of technology and then go, whoops. By the way, Marketplacer has all of those 4 models to connect in as a seller, because it is really important. But just make sure that you're understanding what your seller and client needs are, because it goes back to seller experience. At some point, we're going to be competing for sellers, so make sure you make it easy on them.
Yeah, I amen. And I think there's so much enablement training that's required anywhere, and certainly if they're not your own employees in your own business, you have less contact with them and ability to do that. So you need to make sure you make those materials, and whatever the onboarding is, make it dead simple and really, really easy.
Right.
I imagine you have had many conversations with folks who have attempted to have come to you because things have gone sideways with other projects. What are some of the areas where you've heard, I don't want to say horror stories, but missteps that you think folks who are interested in this space ought to be aware of before embarking on this journey?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but a lot of times when people are evaluating tech, especially if they have a timeline, they're like, how long does it take to implement this? How long does it take? And they want to like stress test your Gantt chart. And we always sort of laugh because we go, guys, let me tell you, the two biggest hurdles for people to get onboarded are not tech. They all both revolve typically around this concept of a seller strategy. So you have to have all your sellers signed up to be able to go live. Mm-hmm. And people underestimate what that is, because a lot of times, especially if they're coming to us like, hey, here's our RFP, rather than, hey, can you walk us through what we need to have from a strategic perspective and make sure, hey, have you done your commercial model? Have you done your seller strategy? Where are you at on this? The most successful clients are the ones that we and a partner will walk them through all of that, because they'll get there and they're like, okay, but we can sign up sellers. And then, you're like, okay, you have a pitch pack, you have your seller contract, do you have your commissions? Do you have, have you stress test this with any of your sellers? Have you gone out and said, hey guys, we're thinking about it. Would this fit in? Because if you're making assumptions about your commercial model that says, we built a business case because we thought we could recruit, we have 40 for drop shipping today, and we thought we could get to 300 and all of them would accept a commission rate of, 14%. And then suddenly you go out, you haven't stress tested that in the marketplace, and you have 200 people that want to sign up, but they're only willing to give you 7%. That's a problem. So go and have some of those conversations with potential sellers alongside your technology conversation, because you can buy all the greatest tech in the world, but if you don't have the products to plug into it, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I used to work with this great developer. And one of the questions every client asks, I should say many clients ask, irrespective of what scopes and SOWs and documents say, it's, when can we go live? How quickly can we go live? And he'd always sort of chuckle and go, we can go live tomorrow. There's a pre-built theme. You slap on a payment gateway, put your products in, you can sell tomorrow. The question is, what do you want to go live with? What do you need for your business to make it a success when you're live? It's not a matter of when you go live. It's a matter of with what you go live, I suppose. Yeah. Both, technically, product-wise, and certainly, vendor and seller-wise when it comes to a marketplace.
Absolutely. And to that point, I would encourage anyone who's thinking about a marketplace strategy is to really think about phases and what are those key milestones, not from necessarily an implementation perspective, but a go live perspective. And we see this with commerce, right? No one generally wants to go live with every single bell and whistle and feature on day one, right? You have a phased approach of how you're thinking about when you're launching with an e-commerce platform. And the same needs to be true for marketplaces. So, what do you want to start with? What is that key business objective? And then how can you build upon that over the next 3 years? And it's not to say that you have this tiny little MVP on day one. That's not true at all. But let's go ahead and get all the strategic pieces understood and ironed out, and then go live with something quickly, rather than trying to have every single thing under the sun and 1,000 sellers signed up and onboarded and all their products in. When you have zero relationships today. Like, be realistic about what you can go and build as a company and what those milestones are, so that you can iterate and learn from them. Now, if you have 1,000 sellers signed up today because somehow you manage that with drop shipping, phenomenal. That should be part of your, one of our customers calls it MLP, minimum lovable product. And I love that term. It's like my new favorite term, because I get it, right? It's how quickly can we go live with the right thing? Then great, that should be part of your MLP. But don't be naive and think that because we have zero sellers today, just magic fairy dust, I will build it and they will come. That only works in baseball, apparently.
Very nice reference. You talked about, you mentioned drop shipping a lot here. I think we opened with, what's there in drop shipping in a marketplace. I imagine that is an area where if you are a merchant who's doing a ton of drop shipping, you may be ripe for a marketplace. Is that sort of the connection?
It is a little, for sure, especially if you're feeling there are constraints of, hey, it's really time consuming. We're not always getting the right inventory. Hey, we want to upgrade, some of our systems, but now that means we're going to have to completely redo all these custom crazy integrations we've done, or I'm sick of managing things in spreadsheets. I also just think it's a little more relatable. We're still finding that people, back to your first question, like, hey, I buy on Amazon, but like, what is a marketplace really? And so drop shipping tends to be a little more relatable. Like, oh, hey, I've heard that term for the last 10 years. I get the correlation, which is, again, why we open with like, hey, sell stuff you don't own, or maybe there's an expletive in there instead, because it's just relatable. It really, kind of breaks it down. And we love talking about some of the marketplaces that you may or may not realize are in your life. Instacart, which so many of us have Instacart accounts now, but where do maybe not people not trust Instacart as much, right? You're suddenly outsourcing something that you do on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis to somebody else. And Instacart decided that they were going to partner with ButcherBox. And so they're now have a marketplace so that you can get your meats from ButcherBox. And so you're thinking about that experience in a different way that's rounding out what the value is that Instacart is providing, but in a very different way. And the same is, Netflix, in a totally different way. They're now getting into merchandising. Or it's actual merchandise. Yeah. And so they partnered and for a bunch of the Netflix exclusive channels and shows that they're launching, which makes perfect sense because Netflix is part of our daily lives. We identify with these characters. We talk about them in references. Why not have an actual physical good? But why should Netflix look away from their core value of what they provide around media instead of saying like, hey, let's go and produce some actual merchandise. And so they've outsourced that as part of a marketplace strategy. So I think we're seeing marketplaces pop up more and more in ways that maybe people don't always think are marketplaces. So it's really, how do you create a better experience that drives more revenue?
It's interesting, years ago, it's not too many years ago, brands had their B2B website and their B2C website. And the B2B website was clunky. It was like DOS. It was, it was old school. And that was fine because B2B shoppers, it was for work. You get on, you need whatever it is you need, you get through it, you put in your matrix order and you get out. We've certainly seen a move over the past few years of B2B buyers. They want a B2C experience. They want a curated, branded, experience because that's what we've grown accustomed to. Absolutely. I'm curious, when I look to marketplaces myself, outside of certainly the Netflixes and the Seamlesses and Grubhubs of the world, which I don't necessarily know I need that, but I don't look at an Amazon and go, oh, that's a really elegant experience, right? It's pretty utilitarian. It's very stark. It's you get what you need. I'm curious, what are you seeing across marketplaces in terms of like, what is the importance of the brand experience of that marketplace versus, listen, I'm here to get in, get out. It's a variety of brands. Let's just do this, check out and get my stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think it varies a little bit retailer to retailer because it's really, what is the experience that your clients need, right? So as a brand or a retailer that's choosing to add a marketplace, it's not your core business. Marketplace is Amazon's core business. You could argue Amazon has a lot of core businesses, but in terms of when you're buying from Amazon, you expect that it's a marketplace. Whereas people who are now entering into, and the same for Etsy, right? It's a marketplace. But when you're going to a brand, if you're going to Surf Stitch, if you're going to Instacart, well, actually Instacart, that's a marketplace.
Careful Instacart, not the best user experience.
Also not the greatest user experience for sure. Yeah. But I think for a lot of these brands that are looking to add on a marketplace, your consumers are not going to say, oh, cool, now that you offer more, I'm willing to sacrifice that customer experience. Yeah. Because then you start to get into, okay, where could I buy this from easier? You have to create a seamless experience of what your customers need from a marketplace perspective, which is why it's so important to be able to make that seller connectivity really easy, which is another reason why you can't scale generally with drop shipping, right? You need that direct feed of inventory if there's any, potential for inventory challenges, unless you're selling something that just has, infinite or some type of connectivity in. So a lot of our marketplaces you don't actually know where marketplace is. Unlike Amazon, where it's like, buy from whoever, it may never tell you that you buy from whoever. It may not. It's the choice of the actual operator. But again, that's part of what is that marketplace strategy. Is it important to you that you create the exact same customer experience? Is it okay that it's not? How does that impact it? Does that limit the sellers that you can use because they can't meet a certain shipping or logistics SLA? And that all has to be thought about before, right? You have to think about that when you're thinking about what is the purpose and the whole strategy of your marketplace. You can't think about that like, oh yeah, someone just ordered it and I have a 2 or 3 day shipping minimum, and they're telling me they can't get product out for 6 days.
Yeah. And that's great. It's a great thought process you just went through. So thanks for sharing that. I'm curious if there's a difference between if it's your brand and you build the website, like what was the surf brand that you referenced?
Surf Stitch.
Surf Stitch, where that's your store that you're also selling other stuff on, versus a third party where I guess the closest analogy I can think of is you go to a restaurant and the server is amazing, but the kitchen is really slow. And you're like, you know what? It's not their fault. They're still great, right? I go to Amazon, I'm like, you know what? I like the products I'm buying. It's not the brand's fault that Amazon might have, this thing that I don't like. It's not Instacart's. It's not Stu Leonard's fault that Instacart has, a less than ideal UI. So
right.
I guess you need to weigh, are you building a utilitarian marketplace that enables people to get the expletives they want easily? Or are you building a marketplace brand experience that is it the marketplace that draws the user, or is it the products that are there? I suppose it's sort of I don't know. I guess it's always the products there, but I think you know what I'm saying.
No, I think it's both. I think
it's
actually
a conduit or your brand.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. And I think that goes back to what is your brand identity and what is that goal for the marketplace? Because you're right. What's the tolerance if you're going to be a little utilitarian? I like that word around the marketplace versus that curated experience. So as you think about luxury, you don't get to be utilitarian at all. And that obviously has to factor into what are you creating for that customer experience, and can you add to it and not just add revenue? Because I don't think you can really give up that much on customer experience unless you already have the dominant position. You're an Etsy, you're an Instacart, you're an Amazon. People want that experience too much. It's that brand identity, really.
Yeah. Well, a few other tracks that I could go down, but we'll save that for a different conversation.
What's your favorite marketplace, just for shopping as a consumer? Right? You talk about B2B buyers because they're all consumers. We're all consumers. Do you have a favorite marketplace?
Marketplace. I mean, my most used marketplace is probably Seamless. I'm not sure what your local food delivery platform is, but we tend to order probably more food than we ought to. But I use it more times a week than I care to share. And that's a marketplace, right? It's a platform that allows you to buy food products from different areas. What's my favorite marketplace? I mean, I'm asking the questions here. I don't know. We all use Amazon. Amazon's convenient. I get a lot of stuff from Amazon. Yeah. But let me ask you that question, I suppose, because you have maybe a different lens because you're in this space and you're probably always looking to see if it's a marketplace or not.
Yeah, I always love just kind of poking around and seeing what people are offering. I think it also understanding kind of what goes into making the sausage. I have a better respect now for how people are running a marketplace and a marketplace strategy. And also now I'm like, I would do that differently, or hey, I would think about this. I mean, I'm still a pretty big Etsy fan. I think they've done a really good job, and especially given how you talk about how quickly someone can adapt to a market or to trends in the market. You think about how quickly there's something that happens and someone creates a digital meme, and then suddenly someone on Etsy has using it a t-shirt and a hat, and it's like 24 hours. And so I do very much appreciate how quickly you can get a physical good turned around, and also the weird stuff, like a custom stuffed animal of a kid's drawing and that kind of fun things. So that's probably my favorite marketplace.
I just realized what my favorite marketplace is. And I think this is a marketplace. It's a services they have a service at a marketplace, and that is TripAdvisor.
I used them last week, and it was fabulous.
So TripAdvisor, outside of being able to look for hotels and book and flights and stuff, the feature I use on TripAdvisor more than anything else is their reviews. If I'm going to look at a hotel or something, I will read 10 one-star reviews. That's what I'll read. Because the one-star reviews are where they go, housekeeping didn't come until 3 p.m. and it said they'd be there at 2, 1 star. You're like, okay, that's the worst thing you can say about the hotel. It's probably pretty good, right? Or they didn't refill my mini fridge, ridiculous things. So, but yeah, just generally the UX is really nice. It's fast. You can find a lot of information about what you're researching, and you can easily book things. So yeah, TripAdvisor, hands down, my favorite marketplace.
Also, I will recommend Goldbelly to you if you've never tried Goldbelly. As someone who likes to have food delivered, you can order like famous food from anywhere. So you can order like cheesesteaks from Philly, which I've done, and they're delicious.
So I ordered a cheesesteak yesterday from a local place in the Bronx that usually does a really good job of them. And they decided, whomever made it clearly didn't understand totally what a Philly cheesesteak is. And they put it on a Kaiser roll. I'm like, that's not a Philly cheesesteak. I was livid. No, I wasn't livid. I ate it. It was fine, but it was not a traditional cheesesteak. So Goldbelly, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Any final words of wisdom, parting thoughts before we head into this glorious weekend?
No, if you're interested in, if you want to walk down kind of the brainstorming path of what does a marketplace strategy look like, what could a marketplace look like, why should we think about it from a just totally strategic perspective, Andrew and I are obviously here and happy to walk you through it from kind of both sides of the coin and give you a little bit of that information that you could, just enough to make you dangerous, that you could go and do some brainstorming and mapping out internally to see if it's an initiative that would work for your brand or tribe or retailer.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely reach out if you have questions. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I feel smarter than when I went into this conversation, which is great that I learned a lot of stuff. So hopefully folks along the way learned as well. So this is going to wrap up this session of Overdose and Chill with Lindsay Moore from Marketplacer. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.